All right, I'm going to call the city council back from recess and then turn it over to Vice Chairman Halliburton.
I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting portion of this meeting started here, so we'll call it to order. Determination of quorum. We do have a quorum for the Planning Commission. And the first item on our agenda is the joint discussion with the City Council on amendments to Chapter 4, the land use of the Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan and the Future Land Use Plan, MAP, 2019-S102.
And we are going to hold a joint discussion with the Planning Commission on the same topic.
That's correct.
Just like you're a matchmaker, Greg, you brought us all together.
Fell right in place as well, Mayor. Thank you guys so much. Good afternoon, Mayor McFarland, Council, Vice Chair Halliburton, and Planning Commission. You're not being punked. Ashton Kushner's not going to walk in. We actually are getting ready to present a future land use map update to you guys. I know you've been waiting so patiently for that. For a quick background, in July 17th of 2017, Murfreesboro adopted the 2035 Comprehensive Plan. It was a 20-year vision for the city of Murfreesboro, with 13 years remaining on that vision. The plan elements included in that in the comprehensive plan was infrastructure, economic development, parks and rec, housing, and a part of that comprehensive plan also was land use, Chapter 4. And Chapter 4 is what we're here to talk about today. In Chapter 4, you will find general principles. You will see land use characteristics, and you will also see the future land use map. The future land use map was designed to provide a tool for the city leaders to inform land use, ensure efficient growth and development, and better capture the vision for the city of Murfreesboro, protect the adequate supply of land, and coordinate land use and infrastructure needs. What is it not? What is the future land use map not? It's not a wholesale change to the 2035 Comprehensive Plan. It's not a zoning map. It's not rigid, fixed, or in stone, but it's not meant to be changed unless it's been studied and approved. Very important that we talk about what it's not. Key points for update. We have been working with the comprehensive plan for the last 4 or 5 years, and we found some opportunities with it. And some of those opportunities drove our key points for the update and what we focused in on as we were updating the future land use map. And that was to function as an accurate tool for establishing infrastructure, to evaluate potential growth, development, and annexation, and to shape policy growth for the city of Murfreesboro. This one right here was probably this bullet point was probably the most exciting. While we were gathering the information and pulling together the update, we met with police, we met with fire, we met with water resources, met with all stakeholders to be able to have a collaborative effort toward being able to update the future land use map. Once we updated the map, we brought all of those stakeholders back in to make sure that what we were producing and what we were establishing and suggesting met what was met the city needs as a whole. And lastly, it's designed to provide a consistent message related to land use and development. So I'll set the tone straight as it relates to future land use map. Today is more than it's just an update to the future land use map. It's not a change to the comprehensive plan. Kevin Gunther will be sharing you the key elements that we have proposed to update in the future land use map. And if I may, before I do that, introduce the other project team, Ms. Green, Ms. Marina Rush, Mr. Kevin Gunther, and Mr. Matthew Baumley played a big role in what you will see proposed today.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. McKnight, and thank you for the pleasure to be here. We've been working hard on this, and we're excited to be at the stage where we can start to really kind of roll this out in a more formal setting And I have to say, I'm having the pleasure of communicating these ideas to all of you, but these aren't my ideas. These are very much part of the planning staff and the city leadership and the other people all the departments we've worked with. So really, this is just my pleasure to kind of communicate some of the ideas that I think are going to be very important moving forward for the vision of the city. There's a lot in here in the future land use map and in the land use categories. I'm just going to touch on the surface of kind of the major changes. Certainly take some time to dive into that report that we provided for you. Certainly take some time to dive into the map itself, because there's some really well-deserved information in there to look at in more depth. So we're going to talk about economic target centers, future study area, infill service line, some of the main changes and character areas, and then a transition policy that would allow for change to the map. Looks like our image did not pull up here. Let's see if the other ones did. Maybe we can reload that, pull it from a different PowerPoint. See if it works here. I'll be able to pull those images if I can. It looks like they got all of them except the first two, so I'll talk through it. All right, so one of the things you'll see, I believe you all have a copy of the map, and I can reference to that, is that on the map, there's land use categories. There are also these big orange circles, and those are economic target centers or areas. Those were developed in collaboration with Jim Colson. He provided us with a lot of economic input. And the idea there is those aren't hard lines on the map. Those aren't actual land use categories, but they are areas that we have established have very high potential for economic vitality. So the city is focused in on those as job creation centers, if you will. And those are, they're listed here on the screen, but if you look on the map, you'll see there's one over at Veterans Parkway in 840. There's one at the new Cherry Lane Extension in 840. There's one at the Medical Center Gateway. Downtown has been established as one of those economic targets. The Hoover site, and then Joby Jackson and I-24. So the whole idea of these is it's all about job creation. It's about allowing for some focus going in towards thinking about the vitality of the city. And Jim Colson identified those as areas as all having some unique attributes. Each one is a little different. But at the same time, we think that those are really good areas to be economic engines. So another thing that we've talked about that is new in this map is the future study area. And the whole idea of the future study areas, it's really establishing areas that are not ready for specific land use. We didn't paint those with a very specific land use target. And we also feel that those are areas that are probably not going to be drawn into city limits within the next 13 years. And the reason for that is there's limitations to the infrastructure, limitations to the services in that future study area. And it's not to say that those areas can't be brought into city limits, but if they are brought in, they really deserve very careful study and evaluation. It's not to say that the county might not continue to develop those areas, and there might be some growth that happens within the county context. So you can see this is the same image that I had pulled on that slide, and you'll see that light green area, that is all what we're calling future study area. The other thing we've done is we've established something unique called a service infill line. The whole focus of the service infill line is to focus smart, sustainable growth that's clearly supported by infrastructure and services, And we found that with working with the different departments in the city that Greg had mentioned, this was an incredibly helpful tool to kind of give everybody an idea. If you're going to focus in on areas that you think are really important to serve, let's have a plan to do that. And it really helped them kind of start to coordinate between each other and between the planning staff on how to make sure that everything that happens, we've anticipated that with our services. So here again, the service infill line is not something that's set in stone, as Greg had mentioned, but anything that we capture beyond that, we really want to put very careful study into that and make sure that it's thoughtfully done. We're also advocating that this wouldn't happen necessarily like parcel by parcel. If you start to look at areas that you want to bring in the service infill line, let's do that within the context of other parcels around it, so it's not just kind of a piecemeal approach. Auto-urban is not a new category in the comprehensive plan, but there's some things that we have changed about it. And really, the whole idea here was that if we're going to have single-family attached, we know we need that as a form of residential opportunity. We know that there's a demand for it. But if we're going to rezone properties and we're going to create more single-family attached as part of the new zoning mix, let's do it a little more thoughtfully. So, this is not a new category, as I said, but we've added some stipulations to be thought about if single-family attached is brought into the mix. And here are those stipulations we've kind of put out for consideration. One is, let's look for parcels that are 10 acres or more. Let's try to make sure that no more than 20% of that parcel is by acreage is in that single-family attached. Let's limit the unit count to 40%. Let's think about the transition. If you think about neighborhoods that are next to these parcels, and how are we transitioning in height and setback from those existing neighborhoods. And let's take a planned development approach to really shape those properties so that it's not done in a vacuum. So these are all things we've added to the auto-urban land use category, and we hope that these are considerations that are made if a new property is brought in under that land use category. This one's really exciting to me because it ties into a lot that's happening downtown. So one of the new categories we created is called mixed form housing. And this is all about residential options and variety of residential options, but relating that to form into the context of the neighborhood. So we provided for this mixed form housing to happen around the downtown areas, and we think that that's going to really tie into some very specific architectural detailing. The idea is that things that are zoned, this mixed form housing, tie into the public street and the public connections that you're making, and that also that it's taken into context, what is the adjoining property next to you? So we want to provide variety. We want to allow for development to change in those neighborhoods near downtown, but we want it to be done in a thoughtful way that thinks about architectural components. This is also a new category that's very exciting, and this is tying into those areas, those orange targets that I talked to you about for economic vitality. So a lot of the orange areas that are in those circles have this new category called employment generating. This is all about focusing on jobs and economic vitality. That's the key focus of these purple areas, if you will, on the map. So it allows for residential, it allows for commercial, but those things come in at the same time in tandem with some type of employment generating, say an office, some type of regional operations center, research and development. That comes in tandem with the commercial and residential. In fact, it has to come in, before those areas are promoted and developed in residential or commercial. So all three uses are important in this category, but we want it to be done in the context of employment generation. This is something that, here again, probably deserves a master plan approach when it can be done, and it's something that we want really to allow for what we call, high-value amenities, high-value public space to be also part of the picture. There's a lot of areas where you see major infrastructure in play where these employment-generating targets have been kind of painted out on the map, because we think the city's invested in those areas. We know it deserves density. We know it deserves a mixture of uses, but we want it to be done in a way that gets really high leverage from that investment of infrastructure and the transportation network that's there. Another new category is business innovation. This is a good example of, say, Joe B. Jackson interchange, the Hoover site. These are prime areas that we think could be very well served by business innovation. And the overall purpose really here is talking about how to create a high-quality industry and manufacturing industry. And it does not have residential land uses. It's really more about creating those partnerships with corporations, perhaps higher education entities like MTSU and Motlow. How can we really create business incubation, innovation, and once again, these are great job centers, but maybe it doesn't have that mix of residential or commercial in it. These also would probably be good areas to target for some kind of master plan approach. So there it is. There's the future land use map in all its context. It's in the last page of your report. It's also a copy that you have in 11 by 17 in front of you. One of the questions that we anticipated getting was, how is this changed if you do the squint test on number of miles that are maybe already in the urban growth boundary? So we have 180 square miles in the urban growth boundary now. We've got 64 square miles approximately in the city limits. If you look at that infill service line that I described, that moves that area out to 99 square miles. So our urban infill service area is really kind of focused into the core, if you will, between the urban growth boundary and the current city limits. And those will give you some pretty good just numbers to do a quick math exercise as to how much area is in those three different comparisons. So I want to take some time to talk about not just the map, what we've charted out and why, and where some of the inputs were that created it. But as Greg had mentioned, this is not set in stone. There's reasons to flex it. There's reasons to change it. But we want those to be good reasons. So within that report, and I think we've talked about even drafting this into the Chapter 4 changes, we wanted to give city leadership and the development community and the planning community some very clear tools as to why this map would change, so that everybody's kind of talking from the same sheet of music, if you would. So the map you have was generated from land parcels. I mean, that's how our GIS system works. So we know there's hard lines drawn, and it's all based on land parcels. But land uses don't always follow exact property lines in a really hard form or fashion. So we want you to realize that there's times when change or transition between those property lines is very appropriate. One of those reasons might be that land uses are being considered at key intersections of collector or arterial roads. What I mean by that is, hey, if something's happened across the street, or a proposal is happening on one side of the street, sometimes at those major arterial intersections, it warrants kind of looking at as a change. Let's think about how all four corners of that key intersection are happening. What kind of dynamics do you have across the street? Another key thing is that you might have property boundaries that change. You might have parcels that are, consolidated or configured together. Obviously, when that happens, it's a good time to explore maybe the land use, maybe the future land use will change when you've got a larger property you're looking at. Maybe there's changes within a property line of a large parcel that warrants more than one land use. There might be unique geographic, environmental, or infrastructure conditions that don't show up in a map. This is a two-dimensional map, right? We can't look at the contours in detail. We can't look at possible environmental features or, say, access features that might have to be considered. That may warrant discussion of a different type of land use. And then I think probably the most important ones are anytime you change this future land use map, we hope that it would be in consideration of what opportunities are there for the city? What ways is this going to benefit the city and its residents, its future residents, as well as its existing residents? So anytime you have maybe a way to greatly enhance public infrastructure, quality of life, those are valid considerations to think about changing a land use category on the future land use map. Maybe there's some unique job creation opportunities. Maybe there are things that would really be visionary opportunities that we can't see in the map now. All those things are valid considerations. We think that it's really important that every time the zoning map is changed, you look at this tool. It's meant to be a tool that gives you very clear guidance. We've taken a lot of time, I think, to craft it out. So when you have zoning changes, you want to look at the land use map change at the same time, make sure that they're kind of working in concert together. Hey, did you want to talk about next steps, or should I keep going on that? All right, so that's kind of a quick summary on the changes. Obviously, we want to hear your feedback and questions. I think Greg was going to just talk about the last steps that we're anticipating with this map change.
For any questions?
Greg, does the future study area encompass all of the urban growth boundary, or is there part of the growth boundary that's not necessarily represented with respects to the future study area?
It's an urban growth boundary.
So, okay. Thank you.
The dotted line will, on your map, Ken, will be the service infill line.
Right.
Yep. And the green is all.
There wasn't, the urban growth boundary didn't go outside of the FSA.
Other questions? Okay, so the next steps is a community outreach. February the 23rd, where we are opening up to the public at City Hall, in the City Hall Rotunda, for stakeholders, public to come in, and also we'll present it to them, for them to also provide feedback. It is our hopes that from there, we will be able to go to Planning Commission to update the adoption at Planning Commission on March 16th, 2022. From there, we would hope to be able to get before council, mayor and council on the 24th for you guys to have a resolution of support and acknowledgement, and then after that to implement the future land use map and start using it moving forward. Questions? Thank you for your time. It's pretty exciting. We're looking forward to moving forward with it so that we can have some consistent messaging and also continue to move forward with the vision, City of Murfreesboro.
Council members, do y'all have any questions? All right, we will, if we can, if y'all would mind doing a 5-minute recess.
Recess. All right, we will do so.
And then we will adjourn our council meeting. So, seeing nothing, will stand adjourned.
I will call the Planning Commission back to order. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our February 2nd Planning Commission meeting. I'm assuming everyone had an opportunity to look at the minutes. We have a motion to approve or any changes.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Okay. With respect to the consent agenda, does anyone have any items that they would like to pull off and discuss further? Or do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Vice Chairman Halliburton, I did have one point of business, and I'm handing out some staff comments to you right now. There was an additional staff comment that we received this morning from the Water Resources Department for the Hooper one-lot subdivision, re-subdivision of Lot 1, item 5L. And I'm handing out revised staff comments to you that include that additional comment as well as a few other cleanup comments from the Planning Department. And so we would like to get that into the record, and so that when you move to approve subject to staff comments, it would include the revised staff comments for this one item. Those have been provided to the applicant, and the applicant acknowledged receipt of them.
But there's no reason, from y'all's perspective, to take it off the consent agenda?
No, sir, that's why we just wanted to get you
Okay.
the revised comments.
All right. Anyone else have any comments regarding the consent agenda? And if not, do we have a motion to approve?
Move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. All right. Where's Lance in here? Thank you for your input on the consent agenda several weeks ago. So you,
Almost made a motion that we read the consent agenda completely, but I was like, all right.
His motion, I think his motion was only when Chairperson Jones was here.
Yeah, right. That's right. No fill-ins. Yeah. And to read
If I
them.
remember right, I had to read every line.
Did you get a plaque with your name on it?
all right, sorry about that.
I feel like that every day, but.
We'll get back on track here. On motion for plats and plans, the first item for discussion is Wingate preliminary plat for 77 lots on 33.6 acres zoned RS8 and commercial fringe located along Franklin Road. Lennar is the developer, and Matthew's going to review this for us.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Halliburton. I'll fill in for Brad Barbie. Brad reviewed this plat, but he had to step out this afternoon. This is one that we've actually been working very diligently with the applicant on making some changes to the plan. There were some issues that we had with it. It was originally going to be on last month's Planning Commission agenda, but the applicants agreed in a spirit of cooperation to remove it from the agenda last month and address some of those issues. There were proposed to be some retaining walls at the rear of the lots. They have since removed those retaining walls, and we feel have presented a much more workable plan to us. And we've actually really have no major issues to discuss. The plan is in good order, as they have, as I mentioned, worked diligently with us and gotten us plans that we think are in good order for the Planning Commission to approve. We would ask that you approve them subject to all staff comments because there are still some outstanding items that would need to be addressed during the construction plan review process with Ms. Knoll. But just the basics of the development, this is the former Melton property, which you will recall was recently rezoned to RS8 in the fall. Lennar Homes is the developer. They are looking to build a single-family subdivision on the property. As you can see, there are actually a couple of commercial lots that they're proposing directly along Franklin Road. And then as you get back into the lot, about 275 feet is when their subdivision starts. But there'll be one primary access point off of Franklin Road, as well as a stub to the west, a stub to the east. The Smith property is next door to the east, and it is very similar in size to the subject property, so we expect at some point the Smith property will develop and we'll need that connectivity to the east to make sure that traffic can flow from east-west from Fortress Boulevard to this property. And there's also an existing stub in the Blackman Oaks East development, that's Schroer Drive, and they are proposing to connect into that street stub. But the plans are generally in good order, and we would ask you to approve subject to all staff comments. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Blomley? There are none. Any comments with respects to this plat, or do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
And is that subject to all staff comments?
Yes.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. The next item on the agenda is Parkway Plates, Region 4, Lot 12. Site plan for 3 industrial warehouse buildings totaling approximately 294,558 square feet on 25.8 acres. Zone PID, located along the easterly side of Logistics Way. Swanson Developments is the developer, and Mr. Blomley is going to handle this one also.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Halliburton. Ms. Holly Smith, one of our principal planners, put in a lot of hard work on this plan. However, she's on vacation, so I'll try to fill in for her for this item today. Mr. Swanson has submitted this site plan, as you mentioned, for 3 speculative industrial buildings. It is in what is identified as Region 4 in the Parkway Place PID. It is the northern portion of this area that is encompassed by the yellow dashed line. Region 4 is one of the more industrial regions of that Parkway Place PID. Region 3 is this area here, and you'll recall about a year ago you approved a site plan for a warehouse on that property. Joe, how many square feet is that? 844,000 square foot warehouse on this portion of the PID. This is directly across the street from that portion of the PID. The street is called Logistics Way, and it's under construction right now. Mr. Swanson proposes 3 warehouse buildings, each totaling approximately 100,000 square feet in size, and they're all speculative in nature, so Mr. Swanson is trying to retain some amount of flexibility for the design of the buildings, depending on the end users he ends up leasing or selling those buildings to. The plans are generally in good order. There are a few things that wanted to mention to you that are still outstanding in the staff comments. But Mr. Swanson has made some strides in attempting to meet our comments. And one of the things that I want to preface this is the PID actually has the language that the Planning Commission has architectural review authority over the plan, over the buildings that are submitted. Of course, when the PID came in, it provided a framework for those buildings, a set of standards that they had to demonstrate compliance with, and it gave the Planning Commission final review authority over that architecture. So I'll go to the site plan itself. So here is, this is kind of, you imagine that this was pointed north. Here are the buildings, and there's an existing subdivision in the unincorporated county directly to the east of the subject property. There is a required buffer, a landscape preservation area of varying width between 50 and 125 feet of width adjacent to that subdivision, and the plan is honoring that requirement. Staff has actually requested that the applicant provide additional berming along that area for sound or noise mitigation, and he has agreed to do that. One of the issues that is remaining is regarding the visibility of the docks from the new Logistics Way, and was on the phone with Mr. Swanson this morning. He's committed to providing additional screening along Logistics Way to screen those docks. And so what we would ask as a staff comment is for you to approve it subject to staff working with Mr. Swanson to provide adequate screening during the prior to permit site plan review process post Planning Commission approval. Also, not knowing the end user of the buildings, their solid waste needs are a little bit unknown. And so what we've asked Mr. Swanson to do was to put a note on the site plans that the solid waste facilities will be determined prior to the permits being issued. And so as we know more about what his end tenants will be, those facilities for solid waste He may need additional facilities, he may need to shift their locations, so we would like to retain some flexibility to make sure that it meets his needs, but it also meets our needs to screen those provisions for solid waste. Finally, regarding the architecture, the plan development states that looking at my notes here, that the office areas shall be distinguished from the remainder of the building, and one of those ways to distinguish that office area is by breaking up the building planes. And so what he has proposed to do to address that is to move the office area, or to move it out 4 feet from the remainder of the building plane. And so what we would like the Planning Commission to opine on is whether that is a sufficient amount to shift that building out in order to break up that plane. And if it is, you could approve it subject to what he has submitted. If you would like him to continue working on that, we'll be happy to continue working with him on that after the Planning Commission approval.
Matthew, can I ask you a question about that? So the adjusting the plane seems like an aesthetic type of a cause. And you did make a mention of kind of making sure that accentuates, this is where the offices are.
Yes.
Is there some reason why, I mean, that I don't think that's necessarily where the offices will be, but is there some reason why we want to accentuate where the offices are? I mean, so cars aren't driving around in circles, or is that what it is?
Yeah, I think it's more for aesthetic purposes.
Okay.
It's so that you have, at the main entrances, you're kind of highlighting a nicer look, so that you don't have four sides metal. And these buildings are predominantly architectural metal panels, which is a permitted material, but that corner where the main entrances are provides some additional break-in materials, some masonry product to break up that architectural metal.
Okay, I just want to make sure there was no other reason that I wasn't certain about, or that I didn't know about.
Sure.
And following up on Mr. Lance's question, so with the, I guess the screening that we're talking about, it's not a fence, but it would be landscaping, right?
That's correct.
Right. And so that screening would be such that, at least from the road, in all likelihood, you wouldn't, depending on the height of the screening, you wouldn't necessarily see the front entrance of the what we're calling the office section. Would that be a fair statement?
No, I think it would be more, so let me go back to the site plan. So the view shed for these docks right here.
Right. I'm with you.
Is kind of down here. So I think we wouldn't necessarily be screening this area right here. The screening would probably be more along these areas. But of course, we would want to make sure that we didn't inhibit traffic sight distance. One thing that I kind of think about is, and I can't remember if it's Husky Truss or Southern Container on South Rutherford Boulevard, there's a combination of berming and landscaping, and even though you've got some, kind of an industrial-looking building back there, it's really kind of hidden nicely because of the combination of berming and landscaping. And I think that's what we would be going for, is something along those lines.
So the bulk of the truck entrance is going to be that middle one? Because that's where all your docks are?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so you're trying to screen all of that so that you don't see all the trucks, all the docks, all the...
Yes.
Now, how far does the screening go down? Does it
So I
screen the
think-
parking lot?
I think it's kind of a work in progress right now, so I can't really say exactly how far it would go down, but I think that what we would ask is the ability to work with that after Planning Commission approval.
The berming on the back, that's in addition to your normal buffer. Do you know how tall the berming will be?
I don't. If Ms. Smith were here, I would be able to ask her, but I do not have that information.
But it will
Mr.
be-
Swanson, do you, 3 feet?
3 feet with trees on top.
3 feet with landscaping on top.
On that eastern side? Is that what you're
Yes,
talking about?
adjacent to, I think it's Coldstream Road. I'm not sure what the name of the subdivision is, but that's the name of the street. So here's the location, and you've got,
Is it a natural tree line back there already? I think,
Yes.
okay, so it'll be pretty much covered, the neighbors won't be able to see.
Correct.
Yeah, so one thing that I thought of looking at this prior to the meeting was, thinking about the screening, back to kind of the street side piece of this. This is gonna be a cul-de-sac, I believe, that comes down in front.
Yeah,
And the
there's
only
no-
people coming in and out of there are gonna be people who are delivering.
Right.
So it's, I think the idea behind the screening, and frankly, I think the idea behind the aesthetic piece of the offices, I completely agree with having the brick stuff on the corners to break that up, and that makes it look, a whole lot better for not necessarily bricking the whole side of one of these things type of a cost. But I'm good with any amount of that, the 4 feet or whatever. Frankly, I just, in a situation like this, if it's at I guess I'd probably have to say, honestly, I'd feel maybe a touch different if this is the first building you're gonna see when you get off the interstate on the avenue or something, but it just didn't. It's at the
just
end
have a different context.
At the end of a cul-de-sac on an industrial complex, yeah, so I'd be comfortable with that, just my.
I'll throw my 2 cents in. I am comfortable with that also. I think the screening piece is going to help with the docks. So, and if y'all can work out the trash issue, that's great.
Right, so if everyone on the planning commission is in agreement with that, if you wouldn't mind making your motion to approval, subject to all staff comments, and also stating that you are okay with the 4 feet and the 4 feet protrusion, and with giving staff the leeway to work on screening along the public right-of-way, screening those service elements.
So move what he said.
Second that.
Is there any other discussion before we move on?
The only question I have is, so it's 4 feet bump out, but how wide is the brick?
You said
And
why?
are you comfortable that that's aesthetically good?
I think we've been working with Mr. Swanson to refine the design of the building, and so I think as far as the width goes, I think we are comfortable with that.
That's fine.
All right, seeing no other discussion, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the Stone Bridge at Three Rivers, Phase 2C, site plan for 24 single-family residential attached dwelling units on 8.8 acres zone PRD located along Cason Lane. AR Nashville LLC is the developer, and Ms. Rush. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I know it's been a good day. This project is before you and not on, typically we would put this on the consent agenda, but is not on consent for 2 reasons. There was a prior approval for this site plan for the townhomes that had expired, so the date is no longer valid for them to move forward with their site plan construction. So it's come back in for site plan again. The second reason is that this project was not on the list of the Salem Highway Corridor notice regarding the new sewer approvals, where the Water Resources was listing out which projects can move forward in that new Salem corridor. So even though this one had a prior approval, it was excluded from that list, I think, as an oversight. And so staff is feeling comfortable in terms of moving it forward to you all for review and approval today. However, it would not be able to get any permits for construction until the sewer project is constructed. So it will not affect or impact where the city is in terms of its analysis for that corridor. So with that being said, Matt Taylor is here if you have any questions specific to the project. It's basically 24 single-family townhome units on 8.83 acres. And again, this was a prior approval by the Planning Commission. I can answer any questions if you wish.
So my question has nothing to do with this application, but at what point does a site plan or PRD expire?
Well, there are two different things. So the PRD is zoning, so that stays or remains in perpetuity
Okay.
until you actually change it or amend it. Site plan has a 3-year lifetime.
Okay.
So they actually have to not only obtain the permit, they have to initiate at least land disturbance.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Did you need Matt Taylor?
Y'all need Matt?
Patty T.
All right. So no questions, any comments? If no comments, do we have a motion?
Make a motion that we approve, subject to all staff comments.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. So we're moving on to new business. The first item is scheduling of public hearings, a proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance pertaining to the following: Section 2, interpretation and definitions; Section 18, regulations and general applicability; Section 25, temporary and accessory structures and uses; Section 34, floodplain zoning; and then Chart 2, minimum lot requirements, minimum yard requirements, and land use intensity ratios, including Chart 2 in notes. The City of Murfreesboro Planning Department is the applicant. And back to you, Mr. Blumley.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Halliburton. Our one item of new business today is a zoning ordinance amendment. It's kind of 3 parts. So it's kind of in looking to be proactive for possible industrial developments that may have accessory structures. And I'll give you an example would be like a storage silo, which oftentimes may necessitate a building height greater than the 75-foot maximum building height in the LI, GI, and HI zoning districts. We are proposing a zoning ordinance amendment that would allow accessory structures in those 3 zoning districts for structures that are accessory to industrial uses. You know, those zoning districts permit a variety of commercial uses as well, but accessory structures for uses that are classified in the zoning ordinance as industrial would be permitted a 100-foot building height, and that would be subject to some additional setback requirements. So those setback requirements would be equal to 1 times the height of the structure from any adjacent property line, and a minimum of 200 feet away from any adjacent property line that's zoned residential, so that we wouldn't have a storage silo. There aren't too many instances where you would have industrial zoning directly adjacent to residential zoning, but in the event that we did, you wouldn't have a storage silo looming over a neighboring residence. The second change is with regards to the height of light fixtures for recreation fields. We brought a zoning ordinance amendment to you a couple of years ago, back in 2020, when the Board of Zoning Appeals approved, Mr. Halliburton, you'll remember this, when the Board of Zoning Appeals approved a height variance for light fixtures at the Cherry Lane Soccer Park. And the Board of Zoning Appeals expressed its concern at that time that because we had approved several of those, that it was time to review amending the zoning ordinance rather than bringing variances to the Board of Zoning Appeals, because one of the things that we have to analyze is when we see multiple or repeat requests for the same type of variance, that's when we have to be proactive about amending our zoning ordinance, so that the Board of Zoning Appeals isn't constantly having to review the same variance requests. When we have a bunch of the same variance requests, that tells us that something may need to be changed in our ordinance. So what we did at that time was we put a provision in the zoning ordinance to allow for light fixtures at recreation fields to be up to 80 feet in the park zoning district, 80 feet tall, and up to 80 feet tall for when they're accessory to recreation fields at an institutional group assembly use. So that would be at a high school athletic field or something. So that's in the zoning ordinance right now, but one of the things that we wanted to do was take a look comprehensively and whether there are other opportunities to clarify the height of light fixtures for recreation fields in our zoning ordinance. So there are other zoning districts where recreation field as a principal use are permitted other than just the park zoning district. So we included the 80-foot maximum height limitation for recreation fields for all zones that permit recreation fields as a principal use. And another possibility for a recreation field to be accessory to another use would be a commercial outdoor amusement. And so if there's a recreation field at a commercial outdoor amusement, we are proposing to include that 80-foot maximum height as well to be consistent. Now, we are including a provision in there that if the commercial outdoor amusement is of a certain acreage and if the light fixture is located minimum 300 feet away from an adjacent residential property line, light fixture could go up to 100 feet by right. And we are also adding a definition of recreation field in the zoning ordinance. Right now, so we've referenced the recreation field definition a number of times throughout the zoning ordinance, but we have no definition in Section 2, interpretation of definitions, and so the Planning Department and Legal Department have put our heads together for a definition for the recreation field use. Finally, there are amendments to Section 34 floodplain zoning to bring our ordinance in line with FEMA's model ordinance. Mr. Sam Huddleston, our floodplain administrator, in consultation with Amy Miller, the state's floodplain management coordinator, are recommending some modifications to that section of our zoning ordinance to bring our floodplain management regulations in line with FEMA's model ordinance. Be happy. I know just enough about floodplain zoning to be dangerous, but if you have detailed questions, Mr. Huddleston's here. And we need to schedule this, we need to discuss this proposed amendment and then schedule it for a public hearing, and we would recommend March 2nd as the public hearing date. Be happy to answer any questions.
So I have a question. I don't know if this was prompted at all by Legacy Fields, but just a question, and I know you're probably very preliminary stages of what their plan's going to look like, but I'm assuming that what they would want to do would fall under these. Had they looked at these things that you're trying to accomplish today versus them having to come before the BZA to make specific changes to their plan? You follow what I'm trying to ask?
I do. So, yeah, Mr. Halliburton, you're correct. So their use is classified as a commercial outdoor amusement. It meets the definition of commercial outdoor amusement in our zoning ordinance. And the section of our zoning ordinance pertaining to outdoor lighting fixtures, outdoor lighting fixture height at commercial or at recreation fields does not mention recreation fields at commercial outdoor amusements. So what we're trying to do is comprehensively look at all the various opportunities where recreation fields might be a possible principal or accessory use, the Legacy Sports Facility being one of them, and to make provisions for lighting fixtures at all of those uses. And so this would enable them to have 80-foot lighting fixtures by right, and for the portions of their site that are greater than 300 feet away from residential zoning, they would be permitted to have 100-foot lighting fixtures.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about the, I'll stay on that one. I have another question on a different topic, but what's the reasoning for the 50 acre? I mean, it seems to me if you're a certain amount away from residential, what difference does it make if it's a 10 acre park versus a 51 acre park?
Yeah, it's wanting to include a certain threshold so that the 100-foot lighting requirement is not the standard. It's a kind of a special circumstance.
Okay.
And I think that if you have a smaller site, it's more difficult to get that 300 feet away from, if you're directly adjacent to residential.
Certainly correct, yeah.
So will this, and this is probably not a fair question, but will this adversely affect the fields that Providence Christian Academy is trying to put in place behind the church?
No, that is a planned development zoning.
Okay.
And so their light fixture height will be regulated by the planned development pattern book.
Okay.
I had another question on the first item on here, the 100-foot accessory height. The idea that this might be a storage silo, it certainly sounds like maybe that's what's maybe generated this, that's maybe somebody's asking for that, and that's what it is at this point. I guess I'm kind of curious as to whether or not there's not a better way to, give planning staff the authority to be able to go to 100 feet if it's deemed like it is something like a silo, or if we're going to get ourselves into a position where if we make it 100 feet, if it's an accessory building, that opens the doors to people coming in and saying, well, this is our main building, but this is our accessory building, and we're going to make it 100 feet tall. I'm assuming there's some definition behind accessory, but I guess honestly, I got a little bit of heartache about the whole 100-foot thing anyway. Just whether or not, there's that's a substantial, whatever that is, 30% increase on top of what we've had for a very long time in our industrial zoning. It's 30% higher or more to, 35%, 33% more height. I got a little heartache about it, I guess. Is there something that you can tell me of why I shouldn't?
I think what we, when we're presented with potential developments and they have facilities like that, and our only two options are either make application as a planned development, which is a lengthy and expensive process, or make application to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance. And so we're going to tell them that when you have a height variance, there's really, and we're trying to really, not trying, we have trained the Board of Zoning Appeals, and Mr. Halliburton can tell you this, to really, really scrutinize variances to make sure that they meet the criteria that are in our zoning ordinance, which Mr. Ives has crafted from state law. And height variances, there are really, except for when you have a cell tower, there's really no instance where a height variance is, I won't say there's no instance, but there are very few instances where a height variance can meet the criteria, and Mr. Ives can nod or shake his head, but
I would agree.
So what we're trying to do is be proactive so that when those sites come in, we don't have to tell every one of them, not saying that we've got a bunch lined up, but we don't have to tell every one of them that a planned development is the only route that they can go in order to have those types of structures.
Do you happen to know, and I hate to feel a certain way with the kind of under the adage of, because it's always been that way, right? Because we've been at 75 feet. And so I don't want to necessarily just make my decision based on that. But I mean, in surrounding cities, counties, municipalities, whatever, I mean, what is a typical height restriction? I mean, 75 feet is pretty big. already. I mean, whatever that is, six stories or so, I assume. I mean, something like that. And, I mean, that's a pretty tall facility for an industrial site already. And to increase that, you know, I don't know, if it's 150 feet everywhere else, I guess I'd feel a little more comfortable going from 75 to 100. But if it's 50 feet and we're already at 75 feet, I'm a definite no.
I think there are a couple of options. I think you could either defer that part of the ordinance amendment for additional study, or you could go ahead and move forward with the public hearing, and we could attempt to get you that information prior to the public hearing. Either way, I'll look at Mr. Huddleston.
Sounds reasonable to me, yeah. I mean, that's certainly a reasonable idea.
And if for some reason, you know, we have a three-part ordinance amendment here. If for some reason you needed to detach one of the three parts because it was giving you some heartburn, you know, at the public hearing, you could certainly approve a portion or portions of the ordinance amendment and not others.
Okay, yeah, I'm perfectly good with doing that.
Matthew, I had a follow-up. I think you touched on it, but I wanted to ask for clarification on the minimum setbacks. When accessory use allows for up to 100 feet, is that the minimum setback is subjective according to planning, or you're saying there's a formula in writing and it's more?
No, there is a formula in writing. So here if it is greater than the 75 feet, which is allowed by right, and bear in mind the 75 feet only has to meet the same setbacks as the principal structure. So the 75-foot tall structure could be up to 10 feet from a side lot line and 20 feet from a rear lot line and 42 feet from a front lot line. And what we're proposing, it would have to be a minimum distance equal to its building height from any property line. So if it's a 90-foot tall accessory structure, it would have to be at least 90 feet away from any adjacent property line, whether that's front, side, or rear. And it would have to be a minimum distance of 200 feet from any contiguous property zoned or used for residential purposes as measured from the lot line of any contiguous residential property. So even though you could potentially have a greater height for the structure, it would be required to be separated from the adjacent property lines by a much, much greater distance than a 75-foot tall accessory structure.
Perfect, thank you.
That helps my heartburn a little bit.
Yeah, that helped my.
That's a little better already. I just got one other comment to make that I'll just get out on the table to make sure we're thinking through this before we just go ahead and schedule these. I mean, I'm good at scheduling the hearings on all these. The floodplain zoning, there's some news out, you know, in the Middle Tennessee area right now about some new floodplain, actual floodplain zoning, not just floodplain zoning ordinance stuff. I guess it makes me just kind of want to make sure, I mean, all we're doing here is we're kind of changing some language to come up to snuff with what the FEMA language says we need to do. This has nothing to do with us changing our floodplain zoning, which is just what's happened.
No, that's correct. What we are doing is we received an example of a model ordinance from the state floodplain coordinator, and we basically cut and pasted from that model ordinance per her instructions. And Mr. Huddleston could touch on this more, but you'll notice in my comments, this is one of the primary modifications is to add that a conditional letter of map revision approved by FEMA is required prior to allowing a development to modify or encroach in the floodway and or increase the base flood elevations. So that's the primary change that we wanted to get. And then everything else was kind of cleanup to bring us up to the model floodplain ordinance. And here's someone who knows much more about the topic than I do.
Sam, I'll ask you a question about that, just kind of a very broad question, though. I mean, that sounds like a pretty big deal, but, I mean, we do that somewhat, not all, I don't want to say often, but do we have things that do modify or encroach or increase the base flood elevations? Do we?
We do, Mr. LaLance, and the main purpose for this amendment is to allow our development standards to be a little more permissive in making modifications to the floodplain. Currently, the way our ordinance is written today, the only option is for a no-rise certification. However, FEMA's language has been permissive for many years now to allow a conditional letter map revision or them to approve it before you build it approach, where modifications to the floodplain and floodway and modifications to the elevations can be made with their approval. And so we're lining up our ordinance with what we've actually been doing, if I could say it that way.
Okay.
And FEMA brought to our attention that our ordinance was not as permissive as our actions had been, if that makes sense to you.
Yes. Could I ask you to think on this, and maybe it's more of a city council question probably, but it could be, I don't know really the right body, but I'll just say, make it a comment so that you really don't need to answer, but would you please consider what's going on in the news around us as it relates to floodplain rezonings and, redrawings of that? Don't address it today, but will you please look into that? And, I just want to make sure, it feels to me like that's one of those things that we were talking about earlier where you just let it go, you let it go, let it go, let it go, and then all of a sudden somebody's got to rip the Band-Aid off and it hurts a whole lot. If there's things we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, and I don't mind to give you an update today. Currently, there is a proposal from FEMA to modify some of the floodplain areas in Murfreesboro. In other words, to redraw the maps, reevaluate the elevations. That's been on public notice for about 2.5 years now. It has been delayed because of COVID considerations, but we're expecting really in the near future that FEMA will tell us that their proposed changes are now were put on notice that they will become effective in a short time. So we do expect some of those modifications. We've reviewed those at the staff level. We've had some outside consultants review them. We've shared them with some of our stakeholders just to evaluate those maps. And so there are times, I'm 22 years with the city, we've probably had 6 major map adoptions where things in the floodplain were changed based on better information, improved models, changes in the stream, if you will. So that's a very common thing to update maps from time to time. And that's driven at times by FEMA. It's also driven locally by the city. There are certain streams and areas that we understand have poor representations of the actual floodplain today on the current maps, and so we propose to restudy those. The mayor and council have approved contracts for us to restudy those and then propose modifications to the map based on the new information. That's something that's driven at the staff level. A floodplain map for us is a planning tool. So having the best planning tool available to the staff, to our citizens, and to the development community is critical to us. But it's also part of a flood insurance program. And so the other piece of this is a 3-leg stool, and I'm getting on my FEMA soapbox now, aren't I, a little bit, floodplain soapbox, but the floodplain management regulations are really a 3-leg stool, with FEMA carrying a good bit of the technical load on that, the insurance industry providing a good bit of the risk management, homeowner, business owner, property owner, floodplain, our flood insurance management standpoint, and then local governments serving as the regulatory and oversight for their community. So we're given ordinances to adopt that have to equal or exceed the federal model ordinance or and recommended to meet or exceed the state model ordinance. And so the local enforcement of the floodplain is given to the city of Murfreesboro. by that. So all three of those bodies play a part in regulating and managing what is really a flood insurance program. But we also use it to make decisions about our community for roads and drainage and risk management, all sorts of things we do with that tool once we have it. And I'd be glad if you got, Mr. Lance, if you got some specific examples of some of the things going on in other communities that's come to your attention, so I can understand maybe what's on your mind about that.
It's just all over the news right now. There's a community in Middle Tennessee that they've redrawn the maps, and now everybody's kind of figuring out, well, now we have to go get flood insurance. We were allowed to build in this spot.
Correct.
Now it's in the floodway or plain or whatever, and now I got to go buy some expensive flood insurance that I had no idea I was going to need. And so it's that's the part I'm hearing about it just on the headlines. But
gotcha. And that has a real impact on a homeowner, on a borrower, on a lender.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I understand.
Impact on, as far as the change going through, and how has it impacted the developers or the plans that we have in place that have been approved?
So
Be handled in the future.
So what happens, really, FEMA calls, the city calls me and says, hey, we've got this project that we're aware of, and it looks like there's some work going on in the floodplain here. Can you tell us what's going on? And historically, we've approached that one way. What this allows us to do now is to get FEMA in on the front end and get their buy-in on the front end rather than it happening after the fact. So to me, it's more permissive for the development community to allow that, to allow their projects to move forward when they do have proposals to modify the floodplain. So it's very, very limited, only a handful of cases per year that we deal with like that.
So am I hearing you say that a developer might be able to get a letter of map revision on the front end of this deal?
A conditional letter of map revision.
Wonder if would that alleviate, well, you're probably not going to know the answer to this question, but would that alleviate the bank from requiring flood insurance?
It would generally be independent of that unless there were significant changes in the predicted flood elevations with that conditional letter of map revision. And our goal would be, even with a conditional letter of map revision, to maintain changes in the flood elevation at no rise, or if there is a projected rise, that we understand the impact on the properties that would be affected by that, making sure it's not putting structures at more risk than they were before. Make sure, in most cases, the developer or property owners friendly to the developer's plan would be impacted by the proposed changes, and most of the time they're going to have to understand those and sign off on them before we take it to FEMA anyway. But and generally it's going to be limited in scope to just a couple hundred feet of the stream and a couple of properties.
Okay, any other questions? So what as a commission do we want to do with respects to guidance on what I guess, do we have to have public notice of what we're going to talk about at the public hearing, or if we choose not to talk about one of these items, that's not something that we have to declare, right?
I'm comfortable that we talk about all the items.
Okay.
I think we can start backing stuff out at the public hearing level, right? I mean, we can have the public hearings for all of them. I certainly am good with that.
Okay.
If we start to approve and make motions at that point to approve those things, then we can start to carve. Did I hear that right?
That's fine.
All right, so what dates are you thinking, Matthew?
March 2nd is our next evening meeting.
All right, I'll make a motion that we set the public hearings for these things that are on our list for March the 2nd, 2022. Subject staff comments as if there need to be some.
And it would just be one public hearing. They're packaged all as one.
All right, the public hearing.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. All right, we are to staff reports and other business, and believe it or not, we have other business. So I think okay. Margaret Ann's going to talk about Avenues Plaza redesign.
Go a meeting without say. Okay. At the planning commission meeting last month, brought an item up for a plaza redesign for the avenue located along Medical Center Parkway. The property is zoned Commercial Highway District. It's also located in the Gateway Design Overlay District, and it's got a planned signage overlay on it. And of course, we're very familiar with this property. It's something that the city's invested heavily in, the community, and we think it's really an asset to this area. The property was developed around 2006, 2007. At that time, there was, of course, a master plan, and the master plan included some formal open space amenity areas. And this is a plan proposing to make some modifications to that. The area what we're looking at is basically in the center, the heart of the avenue. It's in front of, or if you know where the pergolas are, it's between the pergolas, and then you can see that. And here I don't have my telestrator, and you know how much I enjoyed last month marking patterns and directions on it. But this area that we're talking about is actually the center, and then these two drive aisles. So it would be basically like a gathering space here. The traffic remaining open here. And then these lanes, of course, would remain open, and you would have to come here. And then the traffic opening here. Just as some background, let me get through my report. When the plan was originally approved, you may recall there was a fountain here and an artificial grass area that was part of the lifestyle component of this lifestyle center. You reviewed plans in 2017 that removed that fountain and actually with some building additions. Something similar happened with the Avenue Camp Kids, which is here, and I did one more picture just for posterity. I was hoping Lauren would be here, but there's the snail we're all so fond of. But there was this space where it was another lifestyle component in the avenues, and there were events there, and it was called Kids Camp. And in 2019, that you can see here, there's some people with their yoga mats. It might be a little hard to see, but from Google Earth, they're having an event that day. That space was taken up with a building addition as well, H&M. And during these changes, there have been several owners. Cousins Faison, I was here way back when they initially did the plans, sold it to Heinz. Heinz sold it to Big V, and the applicants today are Big V. And when these elements were removed, we were told that in the future they would come back with a plan to change or to give back what was taken. They felt that they could do a better space somewhere else. And so today is the plan that you're to consider for where they're bringing that back. Now, this is the site plan for the area. You can see that the traffic is still open around it. When it was brought up, Planning Commission actually deferred action on this item because they were concerned with the location of it. And so the team are proposing a few changes. I'm going to ask Mr. Gunther, who represents the applicant, to come up and talk to you today, but they wanted to come back to the Planning Commission because I asked if they wanted more time or if they wanted to come back today, but they really want to come back to you and see where you stand on the matter here with what's going on. And the changes that Mr. Gunther will go through these, I guess the bigger changes are these planters that are at the end of the drive aisles have gone from terracotta, which is just dried clay, to concrete. They're 30 inches tall, so they do provide a visual cue, and they are now concrete and not terracotta. But that's been the change. There's some fencing added just along the sides here where the pergolas exist. I think there were two other changes that Mr. Gunther will go through, but those were the ones that they wanted to show you. The amenities have remained the same. You can see this is clouded because it's changed to concrete, but this is an example of what that planter is going to look like. The shade structure in there is this Trex structure, but it will actually be the Sierra tan color, not the red that's shown here. There's seating proposed, various forms of seating. And then I put in my car, but I didn't bring in with me the physical sample of the artificial turf that they're proposing in this area. But their packet, and we should have handed something out to you where you have access to these drawings as well. Their packet shows some exhibits that do a good job showing you what it is they want to construct here. So that's the plan. They're coming back to you. They've heard your concerns. They're wondering if they've done enough to address them. Mr. Gunther, would you like to come? And he wants to show you examples of other areas, and I think maybe talk about what they are doing for the area. After he provides you information, if you have any questions for me, I'll be glad to answer them. This is initial design review. I'm sorry, I meant to ask. So, of course, today you can take any action you'd like, but if you wanted to move forward, it would need to come back, but depending on what you decide.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Just as it was highlighted to you by Margaret and Ms. Green, nothing has changed as far as the design of the plaza itself. This really is a lifestyle mall. That's why they want to do this. They want to activate some of these spaces. What you saw on your plans hasn't changed since we were here last, other than additions that we made to try to address some concerns about pedestrians crossing the access aisles around the space. And what I'd like to do is bring Brandon Baxter with our company up, and he's a transportation engineer, and let him speak a little bit to that, because I'd like you to hear directly from somebody who's on the transportation side. So the four things we've added are some fencing along either side. We've turned the actual planters into concrete so that they would be more of a barrier. We've added some potential speed bumps and some signage. But I think I want Brandon to speak a little bit to what he's seen, because he did do a traffic analysis out there as far as the fact that this is already a pedestrian space. We're just trying to enhance that. We're not changing that. I'll let him speak to that a little bit more.
Thanks, Kevin. He stopped short of stealing all of my thunder, but he did go through a lot of the things I was going to talk about. So, like Kevin said, when we got into this with Big V, actually back over the summer, one of the things we did for them was to observe and actually count the activity going on in this area. We did that back in July when it was warm and sunny on 2 weekends, the last 2 weekends in July. July 31st ended up being the busier weekend. We counted vehicles and pedestrians as they moved through this area, and just observed how they interact together. And this has been a situation, the circumstance in this development has been going on for many years, and they coexist. It's a shopping center, it's a parking lot. You expect a lot of slow moving vehicles. You expect a lot of people walking, and that's certainly what you have out there. As it pertains to how traffic flows, it does. There's a lot of traffic that comes in and turns right and goes to what I would call the north or the northwest, and then there's some traffic that does go straight across and utilizes those. Let me go back to escape. We'll focus on this one. So there was a lot of traffic that would come in and turn and go out this way to parking down here. A smaller amount did come straight across. We assessed, what happens if that traffic has to come in and go around the plaza. And the same thing on the opposite side. A lot of this traffic would flow down this aisle and go straight across. And we assessed what would happen if that traffic has to come in and essentially make this extra movement here. There's capacity. Everything is moving slow enough. They can do that. We're comfortable with the efficiency that can be maintained there, even with the pedestrians that we counted at all of these crosswalks. The other thing we looked at was, as Kevin mentioned, the plan for this plaza and what can be done to address the concerns that we heard here. And then also just things that we talked about as a group as we went back and reassessed things. And Margaret Anna mentioned, enhancing, making these terracotta plantings more, making them concrete, making them more definitive. I think that helps now when people are pulling up to this crosswalk. Right now, they see this aisle, and it goes all the way to where this space down here is. And it can almost lead them to kind of look past the crosswalk. Now they're going to be pulling up to it, and they're going to see that their aisle ends. And now they're going to see our enhanced concrete plantings in that enhanced visible area there. So they're going to be drawn more towards slowing down and stopping, which I think will help that.
Can I ask you a question real quick about the concrete plantings? And I apologize, I wasn't here for the last meeting, so I'm coming in on the backside of this a little bit. Is that concrete, stop a car going 10 miles an hour, or is it just kind of like a concrete, like this little hollow thing that it's still going to bust right through if it hits it?
My understanding is it's substantial enough that, a car moving 10 miles per hour, if you come up on it and, if you've got the pedal down, you're gonna get up on it and then squeal and it might push a little bit, but I think it's got enough mass to it that if you bump into it, it's gonna have enough there that it's gonna push back.
You got a picture of what that would look like?
We got that in here?
Yeah, it's in that packet. They're substantial.
You're assuming people in the avenue drive 10 miles per hour.
Well, yeah,
Hysterical.
I'm just trying to get some idea of if they got to come to a stop sign though, right?
Yes, sir.
That's a stop sign right before that, so
Yeah, I said this was 30 inches. This one says it's 2.5. This one says 30 inches. We'll probably need to get,
Concrete is 30 inches.
this is it. So it's a concrete planter.
And it'll be full of, soil and mulch and then the planting on top of that. So I think it's once the plant is on there, it's going to be even higher than the 30 inches.
I'm going to say this, you answered zero of my concerns. The kids walking out of the mall with their families and a father being across that street in that park, there's still a risk of a car hitting that kid. And I've sat out there for more than 15 hours since that last meeting, watching if anybody crossed from there to that little grassy area. Not one single person in 15 hours crossed that pedestrian, that park area to that little park area that's there now. Not one person in 15 hours. I'm a flat out no on this because not any of these safety concerns were taken care of about pedestrians crossing from that mall over to that area.
I'm hearing two things. One, Laura shops a lot. And two, that we sacrifice beautiful green space for more store space, and now we're sticking green space in the middle of a parking lot. So I'm with Councilman Wright. None of my concerns have been addressed.
So I guess your issue is the safety of people being able to get into this green space currently?
No, nobody's going to that green space at all, period.
That's what we saw when we were out there too. Nobody's going there.
Yeah, it's ugly.
But, look, I got a 4-year-old, and I can tell you this right now. If my wife comes out of one of those stores, and he saw me across the street at this little park sitting in a store, he's taking off. And most little 2, 4, 5-year-old kids would do the same thing. And there's cars going right there, and those people don't pay attention. Pedestrians almost get hit all the time. And we're not talking about little kids. We're talking about adults almost get hit by cars all the time. You put a little park over there with a parent sitting over there and the kid walks out of that cookie store or anything like that and runs across the street, I'm not going to have that on my head about some kid getting hit by a car.
What Margaret Ann showed was 2 safe spaces in the avenue for families and kids to gather away from moving cars. And they were both taken away. I'm just getting more frustrated each time this comes before us. I'm a hard no. You weren't here last time.
I remember those things happening, actually. But
Just the 4 of us. Yeah, I was going to say I wasn't here either.
That issue, I do think it's really important to understand, those were not things that Big V did. Those were
I'm sympathetic to that point, but I'm not for this. Whatever the history was, I can't. If I vote for this and then 6 months down the road from this being built, some 5-year-old gets hit by a car, I got to live with that the rest of my life. I'm not down with that.
do we happen to know, you guys as the design team, or maybe at least the team working on the logistics of this, are there other options here that don't require being the green space? Look, at the end of the day, you can kind of look at this and it's like the apex of all the traffic
Yeah.
for the mall is right where you've put this, and so it looks like it's kind of like obvious why people don't already go there, and would probably be the same thing on this.
Whether this is going to sway you or not, I don't know.
It's
But, okay, but I'm going to present it anyway, so I think it's a valid
Other options.
idea. So, there are places, I'm going to talk about this one in particular because I know it's a huge deal. In Indian Lake, we have exactly the same scenario. This space is used all the time for huge events. It's got the same scenario where you've got access drives on all sides. So it's not unprecedented. I just want to make sure to present that and make it clear because Big V has looked at this in other places. They are liable just even more than anybody, right? And they've been thinking about this for a while. So I just want to make sure everybody understands this isn't something that was just put out there without consideration.
Can I make this
What's the
comment?
square-
That-
what's the
that
square
looks
feet of
like
that? That's
3 or
massive.
4 times larger
Yeah.
than what you're proposing.
It's larger.
That's a park.
And it's got pull-in parking spots on both sides where you're going to have to slow down to make sure those cars don't pull out in front of you.
Right.
So I think, there's other examples. There's a Perry Crossing in Plainfield, Indiana. But I wanted to make sure you understood that. Whether or not it sways you, I think it's important that they wanted me to present this. And she's got COVID. She's not able to be here tonight or this afternoon. So she wanted to make sure that this was understood, that they are looking at this and they're considering it as well. So I think the things they put out there are the speed bumps, the additional signage, the fences, the concrete planters. If you are all still, in opposition to it based on those things, I need to ask what more would you want
Can
that I
ask-
can understand it? Yes.
Margaret Ann, can I ask you a question, please? So, it sounded like, no, don't be. It sounded like the idea behind this, and again, I apologize for kind of coming on the backside of this, but the idea behind this is there was some kind of agreement made when these changes were made that they would do something to enhance some green space, make a little bit more green space out of what's there is what looks to be the answer. I mean, look, simply put, and I understand that kind of Kevin's point on this as far as trying to, he's trying to do his job, right, to kind of fight for what the applicant is trying to do here. If we just said, hey, look, we took away some of the green space, we've got better, bigger shops there, green space is never coming back because there's no other good alternative for it, does that just end this thing? I mean, we don't have to keep working on the thing in the middle and fighting the fight about whether or not there's enough speed bumps or I mean, do we just say, we let you off the hook, Big B? You didn't do this?
I think there's a few things that go on. One is, I do have institutional knowledge, and I was a part of the conversation with all the different owners, and I remember the promises. And so that's why I showed the changes and that things were going to come back. We're careful that this doesn't become an outlet mall. Take away the lifestyle component, and then what's the difference? It's really a special place. And even when Cousins Faison came, we looked at like the other locations, and this one is better. I think that there's also a requirement to have formal open space, and so I don't know if you could just say no without evaluating where it meets our ordinance requirements as far as that minimum
Have you looked
standard.
at some alternative areas then for this
One of,
I got one.
yeah.
on the site?
Yeah.
I got
I was gonna say, they mentioned something last month, which was essentially
rooftop?
shifting this just so that it's adjacent to, there's hundreds of square feet of undeveloped area here.
Yeah.
It's not,
Don't have to go.
I got another one that you could interrupt the drive lane and it'd be a lot safer. Directly out of Belt, walking out of Belt, going towards the main area of the avenue, get rid of the drive line directly in front of Belt, directly in front of it. It's about the same exact square footage, and you would walk out of Belt's door onto that green area and just cut the drive aisle in front of Belt directly, where you would turn in and drive down the drive aisles of the mall. And you would not be in the middle of a parking lot.
so I think there are multiple options.
Pretty picture.
I've spent 15 hours.
I was going to pull.
Dang, Sean.
Look, I went out there specifically to
Right.
look at a better spot for this thing, because
Where'd Laura go while you were doing that?
And I think, I mean, Mr. Gunther's right, you know, they didn't create this, but they are responsible, and they took it on. There's been no secrets, and the property manager who here remembers it probably better than I do, and she's part of the Big V team, which is helpful. Lauren, she remembers as well. I would caution you against saying don't do it at all. Just because I think it's a very important. Here's Belk.
yeah, see right there, out in front of Belk, get rid of that drive lane right in front of Belk and have it come drive south from the entrance and take a west down that drive aisle, or drive east out of that drive aisle and drive south out of Belk, and leave that area in front of Belk and between the parking lot open where you're not having to cross a lane of traffic out of Belk to get to that common area.
Or all those parking spaces that are only used on Black Friday. Way over there.
Yeah.
The whole school over there.
And I'll show you some of the unbuilt space. I think you're used to not seeing it, but there's, of course, space here that will be is for a store. There's space here as well.
That's perfect. It's already green even.
They
Kind of.
There's space here as well.
I'm colorblind, I can tell that's not really
Your yard
was-
looks like
green space.
Look, I'm open. I'm a no where it's at right now. Pretty much in any configuration, as long as there's a drive aisle on both sides of it, that's where I'm at. Y'all can bring it up to a motion or move it, whatever you want to do, but that's where I am.
Yeah, well,
How about we just do this before we get too much? Let's kind of get a read before we get. I'd rather look at alternatives.
locations, you mean?
Yeah, alternative locations for it. That'd be my first. That was kind of my first question, but I was curious to see if we just said no, what does happen, right? I mean, if we say no, does it just go away? Like we just said, it's okay not to have it, or does it mean we can look for alternatives?
Yeah.
I think at this point, I'd just say I'm a no on the location, and I'm a look for other alternatives.
I think if you say no, they're saying, well, we won't build it then. And I'm saying, well, I've got 13 years till I retire, and for 13 years I will remember, and anything that comes to us, I'm going to remind you.
Well, and if they have committed and promised to do it,
Well, here's the question, are they obligated to do it?
I need to speak to this, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just going to tell you, from their viewpoint, what you've just done is penalized a good deed, right? No good deed goes unpunished is the way they're going to see
a good
this.
deed of what?
They didn't have to do this. This is something Big V came to the city and said, we want to improve the conditions out there. We want to make it better. We want more of an urban environment. We don't want it in the peripheries, out in these parking lots. We want to activate the center of our shopping area. This isn't something that was mandated on them. This was something that they came and said, hey, let's approach the city and improve our space.
They increase their green space to counteract those.
No, sir, not Big V, not Big V. No,
But when Big V buys this development, they buy the commitments that were made.
If this had not been brought to you right now, this wouldn't even be a discussion. There wouldn't be an issue here.
So is this true, Mr. Ives? I mean, we can sit here and argue all day long.
I don't know what the conditions, without going back and looking at the files, I do not remember if this was a formal condition that they replace it back when the other modifications were approved.
Well, I think we need to find that out.
Yeah.
And then that gives us direction as a planning commission as to whether we leave it alone, whether we push them to make it happen. I think that is a factor in the whole decision-making process.
And I will get with planning staff, we'll dig out those records and we'll see what they say.
So that being said, unless you've got other comments, but.
Well, I think they want some direction.
Okay, I think we
so.
need to find out where we stand in reference to
Right.
what was approved and the conditions of approval.
At the end of the day, here's the deal, Kevin. I mean, if you're not, if your client is not responsible for it, and we say we don't like it, well, you came, you asked, we said no, you walk away not all upset and disappointed, okay? Your client doesn't have to build something that they so just wonderfully volunteered to do so.
Right.
All right? If we find out from Mr. Ives that it is a commitment that should be kept and honored by this, and we say no, then we'll look for alternatives.
Right. I mean, I think that is important information
We'll get it.
to pass on. And I think,
Defer it.
Second.
Any other comments?
Before you vote on that, Matthew, Margaret Ann, do we have a time issue on deferring?
I think there is a time issue. If they deny it, they can come back with a new plan in the future if they deny it, but it was submitted in December,
What's the exact date?
So
60 days.
65 days, so they have.
March 2nd would be okay then, or no?
So it was submitted in, I can find out the date of,
Now, Kevin deferred it last time, not us, so doesn't that stop the clock?
that may be a question for Mr. Ives.
I've got to see the calendar and look at,
Yeah. So the last deferral was at the request of the applicant. This one, you guys are proposing, and
The December 9th was the submittal, so March 2nd would put it greater than 65 days. Says the commission shall approve, conditionally disapprove, pending submission of additional information, or disapprove with stated reasons the site plan application within 65 days of the date that the application for site plan review was filed. The commission may defer action in order to allow the applicant to prepare special studies of the impact the proposed development will have upon traffic conditions of adjacent roadways or drainage conditions in the city's drainage system. Failure by an applicant to provide complete and accurate information may be grounds for deferral or disapproval. So Mr. Ives may need to address whether or not, if the applicant consents to annexation, or consents to if he consents to further deferral, if that would allow the 65 days to be increased.
if the application consents to or requests a deferral, then yes, the time can continue. And if not, then
So do we
he
get,
needs to act.
So-
The last times, because that would have been, what, a month? And if he deferred it the last time, does that month count on the clock?
No, and
So we're fine on dates.
but I don't know where, I can't count in my head where the calendar is.
when did that happen, Matthew?
That was on January the 19th.
Is when the applicant deferred it.
Right.
So we're
So
talking
it was submitted on
roughly-
December 9th, and January 19th was when,
27 days. So December 9th plus 27 gets us to January something, so we're going to be okay on 65 days, March 2nd.
Crazy math.
I'll defer that to Mr. Ives.
I will not rule on that off just top of my head without someone giving me a set of calendars.
So 29 days, the application was December 9th. We need to add 29 days, is that what I said, or 27? 29 days that we get credited from the applicant deferral. So 29 on top of December 9th would get us to January 5th-ish. 65 on top of that's going to get us to January to February, February to March, plus 10 days.
Yeah, we're good.
Mr. Gunther had told me he wanted to vote today.
well, my point is, I think it's important to leave the door open. I don't want to shut the door for Big B, but they do want to know if this location, this idea is going to work.
No.
And I think what I'm hearing is no. That can be an informal no, but at the same time, if I don't have a real vote, I don't know for sure, but they don't want to continue to.
Well, hold on just a second. So I recollect, and I could be wrong, on my history on the Planning Commission, even though they couldn't come back, or the rule states, or the whatever, that they can't come back, that with approval from the Planning Commission, that they could come back and the planning commission could hear it even though it had, there's this time frame that they're not supposed to be coming back. It was a vote that we could take as a planning commission.
The Planning Commission has waived that in the past,
But also, it could be substantial.
my recollection.
It could be substantively different enough from what we're seeing right here to be able to bring it back anyway, right? I mean, without even.
So if the action on the plan doesn't lose us opportunity to resubmit a different plan, then there's not a great fear of that. I can tell you, deferring it one more time and coming back to you with the same site is probably going to frustrate them just as much as you, so.
Yeah, the only thing I
there's
would,
any
the only thing I
value
would
in
say
that.
too is the last time that this was brought to us, we addressed about half of the issues. We made a calculated decision not to address the other half. Because what I brought up was the safety and the drive aisles coming into the facility and having someone that gunned it and tried to drive intentionally into the facility and hurt someone. You've addressed that, but we've taken a calculated decision not to address the pedestrian piece.
Right.
So from my point of view, if we voted down, that was the calculated risk.
And if it's voted down at this site with this configuration, that doesn't prevent us.
No.
Otherwise, we're
So
not.
you have two things going on. You have two things going on. It does not prevent you, but you also, if we find out that there is a commitment made, you still have a commitment to put it somewhere else.
I was going to say, that restriction is for zoning, not for site plans, where you can't come back within 18 months. That's a zoning thing, not a site plan thing, so they could come back. And the commitment, we'll look and see legally what's in the commitment, but the management team for the Avenue did make commitments in 17 and 19, said they were going to do it. Now, technically, if you could say, since they changed owners, I don't know what it is, we may need calculations of formal open space and see if they're in compliance now. To us, they presented that they would come back with something. We'll look at the legal aspect of it, but that certainly was made to me.
All right, so there was
Where you got to handle the other.
I withdrew my motion, just to make sure everybody's clear.
go ahead.
I'd like to request it this way. If we can withdraw this current site plan for consideration and allow us to go back to the table and present, something different, that would be, I think, our preference.
It's the same difference.
So you're withdrawing it.
I'd like to withdraw this current site plan.
So we have no reason to take any motion. Is that a correct statement, Mr. Ives?
Yes.
And did you hear?
There's no action.
I withdrew my motion to defer, okay?
And it wasn't passed or acted on. If they withdraw, I don't believe there's anything to act on.
All right.
Agree, Matthew?
Yes, I agree. Thank you. All right, with that,
I'm hungry.
Was that other business?
any other business that we need to talk about before we adjourn this meeting? If not, we're adjourned.